Hello, my name is Patrick Usher, and I am conducting a series of interviews with those who have recovered from postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Tina from Massachusetts, who is in remission from her POTS following work with a functional neurologist called Dr. Symko. A very warm welcome to you, Tina, to this interview, and thank you for sharing your story with me today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So please take us back to the start of your story, Tina.
Okay, well, let's see, where do we start? So, a couple things to note before I start talking. My husband, his father was a doctor, and he was raised in Uruguay. So his father had a lab where he would test blood samples and things to find out what strain of antibiotic would be the best strain to use. And he was frequently aggravated when patients would come to him and say, oh, you know what, this doctor has already given me a broad spectrum antibiotic and I seem to be getting better. And he would get very frustrated. He felt broad spectrum antibiotics were going to take us all downhill, as we see that they are. And so my husband is very well versed in medicine and in the human body and in how things work and how each system in the body is interconnected and everything. And that very much helped in my recovery. And I wanted to say that because when I tell my story, if I just say, you know, my husband said this, my husband said that, and you don't know how well educated he is in that area, you sort of think like, well, who's he? But so there's that. So before I ever had POTS or ever even thought such a thing existed, my life was very full. I owned a very nice little house that was probably a good hour or so from my work, and I had this very long commute every day and worked, 40, 45 hours a week, and married and took care of the house, took care of the yard. We would go and do things on weekends and go on vacations, and I was just a very normal sort of active person. And I had a very sharp mind. I had a mind like a steel trap. I would never forget things, and I would remember where I put everything. And people would come to me and say, 3 years ago I had this email with you. And yeah, I have it right here. That's the way that I was. And my husband and I, in 2015, were sort of kicking around the idea of moving, just because our commute was so long. But I was sort of against it because I loved my house. And my husband had to go and have some spinal surgery. And so he had a good 6-month recovery. And during that time, I started to experience a lot of problems with my menstrual cycle, where I was having just pain and accidents and all these things that were going on. And I didn't want to do anything about it until he was better and back to work. So I suffered through this for a good 6-8 months. And when he was finally ready to go back to work, I went to the doctor and they said, okay, well, you have this very large fibroid tumor. It's like the size of an orange. And the way that it is situated, we can't, there's 5 or 6 different things that we could do. But because of the way that this is situated, we're looking at surgery. And in addition to the fact that we're looking at surgery, we're not going to be able to do it laparoscopically because it's just not going to work. So we're going to have to go in the old-fashioned way, which is pretty much like a cesarean section, to take this out. So I didn't really want to do that, but I felt, I couldn't suffer like this anymore. So I went and got a second opinion. And the second doctor said, yeah, I completely agree with your doctor. This is, these are your choices. And he said, honestly, I think the best thing to do is just go in and just take the uterus itself. If we just take the fibroid, likely it will just grow right back. And if we take a full hysterectomy, then, you throw yourself into menopause and all these things. So I said, okay, so we went ahead and scheduled this surgery. And I was supposed to be out of work for between 4 and 6 weeks. And so in preparation for that, like I said, I'm working at a very small family business. There's only, a handful of people who work here. And so we were trying to figure out, okay, who's going to cover my job for this 4 to 6 weeks? So there was 2 or 3 people who could possibly cover my job at that time. So we said, you know what, I'm just going to train all of them, because if this person can come on Monday and this person can come on Wednesday or whatever, we'll figure it out. But I'm just going to train everybody. So I felt very stressed and pressured, and I was very nervous about the surgery as well. And one night, my husband and I were going home from work. We were sharing a car. So I went and I picked him up, and we're driving home, and we're on the Massachusetts Turnpike. And like I said, it's an hour drive. And after we got past the last exit in Worcester, which is like the last exit for a while, I started having pain in my arm. And I seem to be having a little difficulty over here. Give me a minute. Let me see what's going on. So we kept driving, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I kind of knew this is a panic attack. I was very stressed out, and, it just had all this pressure on me. And I kind of knew, but I wasn't going to take chances. So I said, you know what? Yes, you drive. I pulled over, he drove, and we start driving a little more. Now it's getting worse. So I'm like, you know what? As soon as you hit the next exit, let's go to the hospital. So he brought me to the hospital, which was closest to my house. And that is a little small hospital in Palmer, Massachusetts. And we went in, and as soon as I got in the emergency room, I felt better. So I know that was a panic attack. I know that it was. They hooked me up to the EKG. They took blood. Everything was normal. And of course, I'm exhausted now because I've just had this episode. And so I slept. They said in 2 hours, we're going to redo your EKG and we're going to redo your blood work, make sure that you're okay. Fine. So slept for the 2 hours, and then they did another EKG. They did more blood work. They said, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. We're going to send you home. So we went home, and I'm quite certain that was a panic attack. I don't have a panic disorder. I never have. But there was a time after my first marriage when I was very stressed out that I did have 1 or 2 panic attacks. So I kind of know what they feel like. But I don't have any sort of anxiety disorder or anything, and I never have. But because that incident happened, later when POTS did present itself, and I went to that same emergency room, they recognized me. And so they, as you can imagine. So anyways, I went and I had the hysterectomy. And before the surgery, about an hour or so before the surgery, I was in the prep room, and I started to have a conversation with the anesthesiologist. And I said to him, I really don't like anesthesia. I've had quite a few surgeries in my life, and the anesthesia makes me feel just not good. So we went over all the different things that he could use and all the pain medications that we could do afterwards. And so he settled on, he was going to be using fentanyl on me. And I don't know whether the fentanyl was also what was in my push button afterwards for pain, but they told me they were going to give me a push button afterwards. And they said, you control it. So if you feel the pain is too intense, you push the button, and it's not going to allow you to take another dose for at least 20 minutes. And I was fine with that. So I went through the surgery. I came out of the recovery, and the pain was not really all that intense. It was there. I was aware that something had happened. Mostly my throat hurt from the tube that they put down your throat. So they brought me into the room, and my husband was there, and my father was there, and they kind of banged me around a little bit, bringing me into the room. And so I pushed the button, and I went to sleep. And I was right across from a clock. So I was looking at this clock, and I would hit the button, and then I'd wake up, and it had been 20 minutes. And I would talk to my father a little bit. And it got to be, I think it was like 6:30 in the evening. And I said, I'm going to see if I can go without pushing this button. So I didn't push the button again. I woke up at 3 a.m. in intense pain, pushed the button once, went back to sleep. And when the nurse came in the morning, she looked at the machine and she goes, you haven't pushed this button since 3 a.m.? And I said, no. And prior to that, I hadn't pushed it since 6:30. She goes, you want me to just take this out? And I said, yeah, because I'm not really using it. And I really didn't have any pain. So the surgeon came in. He's like, how are you feeling and everything? And I said, I feel great. I'm really surprised. I thought I was going to have all this pain and everything, and I feel really good. They got me up. They took me to the bathroom and everything, and I had breakfast, and when they felt that I was fine to go home, they sent me home. And I didn't take any pain medications with me when I went home. I told them I just wanted to use like Tylenol or Advil. I don't like pills. I never have. And I'm not a big medication person. So after the surgery, I was told, you'll probably be out of work 4 to 6 weeks, and you can expect, pain when you cough or sneeze and that sort of thing. And I really didn't have very much pain at all. It was a very easy surgery, if there is such a thing. But I did notice that, they were telling me to get up and walk as much as possible. And when I would get up and walk, I just didn't feel right. I felt sort of like tightness in my chest. I don't know if I'd even call it shortness of breath, a little bit of dizziness. I felt just woozy all the time, just not quite right. But I just thought, I've just had a major surgery, maybe I'm just not going to heal as fast as most people. And the incision was going fine. Everything seemed to be going well. I didn't have any pain, but I just felt off, a little bit off. And not too bad, but a little bit off. So that surgery took place on October 15th of 2015. And they wanted me to come in 2 weeks for a checkup. So that was going to be October 30th. It was the day before Halloween. And I don't know if Halloween's a big deal in Ireland, but here it's like cuckoo crazy Halloween with the candy and the sweets and the sugar. And me personally, I cannot go a day without cake in my life.
Yes.
I
It's
love
a good life
cake.
philosophy.
Right? Cookies, brownies, all these things. I love this stuff. So the day that I was supposed to go for this checkup, it was going to be at like 3:00, and it was sort of right down the street from where I work. And as I said, the people I work for, I'm very close with. So my boss had said to me, why don't you come spend the day, and I'll take you to your appointment at 3:00. That way your husband can go to work. He can just drop you off here in the morning. I'll take you to the appointment. And at the end of the day, when he gets out of work, he can come pick you up here. And I was like, great, that sounds good. So I came here, and lo and behold, it's the day before Halloween, and there are Dunkin' Munchkins, little donut holes, and there are buckets of candy, and there's all this sugar and sweets all over the place. And I don't recall if I ate breakfast that day. I don't recall eating lunch that day. I do know that I ate, I don't even want to tell you how many little donuts and how many little tiny candy bars that day. But I did go on the internet and check to see how much sugar did I consume that day.
Okay.
And in addition to the candy and the donuts, I also had a Dunkin' Donuts large mocha latte, and I couldn't find the sugar content on that. So this doesn't even include that. But all told, it was more than 1 1/3 cup of sugar that I consumed during that afternoon. And I don't think I had any regular food. So I went to the doctor's appointment, and he said that my incision was healing nicely, and since I wasn't having any pain or anything, he thought that I'd be able to come back to work in 4 weeks rather than 6. So that was great. And I went home, and the next day was Halloween. So my husband and I went out that day, just sort of driving around. It was a beautiful day, and we just wanted to, go and enjoy the weather. And we ended up, noticing that all the little kids where we lived were sort of out in their Halloween costumes. And so I said, let's stop and get some candy in case we get any trick-or-treaters. So we got a couple bags of candy. Then we went home, and of course I ate more candy. So that was all, seemed to be fine. I seemed to be fine. And then the next morning, Sunday, November 1st, we got up, and I threw some laundry in the wash, and my husband and I both cooked breakfast together. And we had like eggs and potatoes and toast and coffee, typical American breakfast. And then my husband said that he was going to go out to the garage to work on his truck. And we have a wood stove. We had a wood stove in that living room. And so he lit the wood stove, and then he refilled the wood so that I could keep the fire going. And I said, I'm a little tired and I feel a little woozy. So I think I'm going to go and lay down on the couch and just find something to watch on TV. And he was like, okay. And I said, can you just take your cell phone out to the garage with you just in case? Because I don't feel right. I feel a little off. And he said, okay. So I laid down on the couch and I had a blanket on me, and the wood stove was like making that little crackly sound. It was very soothing. And I found a documentary on the Dust Bowl, and I will never forget that that's what I was watching. So just this jolt, my body just jolted, and it was here. Sort of made my arms and legs come up off the sofa, and it scared me. I don't even know how to tell you how bad it scared me. And I thought, like, oh my God, am I having a seizure? Or I didn't know what it was. And I grabbed my cell phone and I called my husband and I said, something's wrong, come inside. And he said, what's the matter? And I said, just come inside. And I hung up with him, and then it happened again. I sort of lost, like, I couldn't really speak after that. I started stuttering when I would speak, and my arms and legs just kept like twitching and twitching. And he said to me, are you cold? And I couldn't say yes or no. I just kept shaking. So a couple of moments go by, and a police officer shows up, and he said, I'm really sorry, but all of our ambulances are out right now. We had a call over to the next town, and they're coming. They're on their way. They'll be here in just a minute. But I just wanted to come because I know that it's going to be a little longer than usual. And he said to me, how are you feeling? And I couldn't speak. I couldn't move my face. I couldn't, I knew what I wanted to say to him, but I couldn't answer him. And I was still shaking. And I tried to say, why am I shaking? And I couldn't get that out. And he said to me, what is your name? And I was trying to say Tina, and all I could do was just like, and I couldn't get anything else out. And I looked at my husband, and he's so calm all the time, and he's so, rational. And he usually has a pretty good idea of what's happening when you're sick or whatever, or what would have caused a headache or a stomach ache if. And he had this look on his face like he had no idea what was happening, and he was just at a loss. And I thought, if he's nervous, something's wrong. And the EMT came in, and he like knelt down next to the sofa next to me, and he said, do you know what day it is? And I'm like, and I'm trying to get Sunday out, and I couldn't. And I knew the answer, but I couldn't get it out. And he said, do you know your name? And I said, so they assumed that I was cold, and they started putting blankets and stuff, and they brought the gurney in, and they were strapping me up to the gurney. And the EMT said to me, can you smile for me? And I thought, he thinks I'm having a stroke, because that's one of the things that they ask you. If you smile and one side of your face moves and the other one doesn't. And I thought, am I feeling things on one side of my head and the other side of my body? And I'm like, nope. And I couldn't really smile. I was looking at him, and I was trying with all my might to, nothing would happen. So they got me in the ambulance, and they put these hot packs, one on the back of my neck, and they put a hot pack on my stomach, and they put blankets over me and everything. And once those hot packs started to take effect, the muscle spasms started to calm down. The tremors started to calm down. And so then the EMT was asking me questions. We went to the hospital, and like I said, it was the same hospital, a different doctor, but still they said, didn't we just see you a few weeks back? And I'm like, well, it was like a month ago. Yeah, we remember you. So they brought me in, they did the EKG, they did the blood work. They said, okay, well, we'll retest you in 2 hours. So my husband is by my bedside, and I'm like, this is not a panic attack. I know that's what they think, but this is not a panic attack. And he was like, I know. And I said, but the EKG and the blood, the first EKG came back normal. They were still checking on the blood. And I said, what if they don't find anything? What do I, and he said, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. So 2 hours went by. They came in to do the second round of blood work, and they couldn't get a vein. And I was shaking. I was sobbing. I was, I didn't have another jolt, but I was terrified. And I knew it wasn't panic. But after the second round of EKG, a nurse came in, and she had a little cup with a pill in it. So she comes in and she says, the doctor would like you to take this pill. And I said, well, what is that pill? And she said, it's a Xanax. And I looked at my husband, and he looked at me, and I said, why? I said, Xanax isn't like a cure for anything. It's just it's what they give people for anxiety, isn't it? And she goes, well, yeah, but it will calm you down. It will settle you and it will get you to the next step. And I said, it's not that I'm not calm and I don't need to be settled. I said, Xanax isn't a cure for anything. We don't know what caused this. And I said, would you take that if you were me? She goes, well, if the doctor, and I said, have you ever taken it before? She goes, no. I said, well, I'm not really up on the idea of taking something that sort of adjusts your brain chemistry. I don't think that that's an answer right now. And she goes, so you don't want it? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to take that. And I looked at my husband, I said, what do you think? And he looked at the nurse and he was very like, I'm not taking any crap from you. And he said, we don't know what caused this. And Xanax, it's not a cure for anything. What you're going to do right now is you're going to mask her symptoms. And you don't mask somebody's symptoms unless you know what's causing them. If you don't have symptoms, then you don't know what's wrong with you. You almost need symptoms to know what's wrong with you. So I don't think it's a good idea. And I said, thank you. And so she said, all right, fine. So she went back and took the pill away. And he said to me, she's upset because those pills have to be kept in a locked area. And now she's got to do paperwork. And I'm like, yeah, probably. So a few minutes later, the doctor comes in and he like leaned on my bed and he's like, so you didn't want the Xanax, huh? And I'm like, no, it's not going to cure anything. All it is just going to make me dopey and I don't want to be dopey. And I said, so what is the next step? What do we do next? And he goes, well, you didn't want to take the pill and there's nothing wrong with your EKG. So we're going to send you home. And I looked at my husband and he just squeezed my hand like, that's fine. Let him release you. That's fine. And I was furious, but I just said, okay. And my husband said, thank you, doctor. And they gave me my release papers and we went outside and we're getting in the car and I was just sobbing. And I'm like, what happened? What's wrong? What's going on? And he said, listen, we will figure it out. If they can't figure it out, we'll figure it out. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think. And he's like, look, you just had surgery. It could be something from that. It could be something from the anesthesia. You could be having an allergic reaction. There's all these things that could have happened. It could be anything, but don't worry, we'll figure it out. And so we went home, he, got on computer and he started to research different things, fentanyl and reactions to hysterectomy and reactions to abdominal surgery. And he's just researching like crazy. And I was just sitting there and I had this onset of paranoia that I don't even know how to describe to you. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid to breathe. I was afraid to drink anything. I was afraid to eat anything. I was afraid of the blanket I had on me over, on the couch. And I was afraid of the wood stove. And I was afraid of the air quality in the house. I mean, I really thought any little thing could have caused this. And I was irrationally terrified. And I don't know why, but for some reason I thought of this girl, Francesca, that I went to elementary school with and that I was connected with on Facebook. And she is a friend of mine who is a holistic health coach. And she knows everything there is to know about nutrition. She's very smart. And I just thought, maybe she can help me. So I called Francesca. Well, I left her a message. I couldn't get a hold of her. I left her a message. And she called me back. And she picked up the phone and she just said to me, what's going on? And I told her the whole story that I just told you. She listened to everything I had to say. She calmed me down. And I don't even know how she managed to do that because I was so out of my mind, terrified and paranoid. And I mean, I literally thought that things like, the soap that we use in the dishwasher could have caused it. I thought that the fact that he lit the wood stove could have caused it. I thought that, using a cell phone could have, I was terrified of everything. Somehow she managed to calm me down. And she said to me, I don't think this is heart. I think this is brain. And I said, it felt electrical to me. It felt like I was hit with something electrical. And she said, yeah, I don't think it's heart. They did all those EKGs and nothing came back. And what you're describing, it sounds like brain. And I said, that makes sense to me. So she said, I want you to immediately eliminate sugar dairy, gluten, soy, and any processed foods. And she said, as far as gluten goes, you might want to go all grain, like no grains at all for a little bit. Anything that is sugar or that your body turns into sugar, you want to eliminate for the time being because it's bad for your brain. So she said, I want you to have some, if you have any beef or chicken or something, and some vegetables and some herbal tea, no sugar, no honey, nothing like that. And do breathing exercises. And she said, I have this doctor, and he's my doctor, and he's brilliant. And I think, I have to see him in a couple of days, and I will talk to him about you, and I'll see if he has any ideas. And I said, okay, thank you. That would be great. And we were on the phone for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. And it was a very productive conversation. It helped me a lot. And I felt like I'm not crazy. Somebody actually listened to me, and I'm not, they're not saying to me like, you imagined it, you're just having panic or whatever. And that was paramount. If I hadn't had that conversation with her, I really don't know where I'd be right now. And if you would like to contact her, this is Francesca. And if you go to her website, which is on the bottom there, that's the picture you'll see of my lovely friend. And she's great. And if you have any health issues, she can help you with your diet to help you with that. So I did have the beef, I did have the vegetables, I did have the herbal tea. And then I went to bed. And my husband in the morning was sound asleep. I woke up and I thought, okay, I need to go to the bathroom. And I couldn't move. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even speak. And so I was trying to nudge him, and I couldn't even really nudge him. And then I was trying to say, Dan, and I couldn't. And eventually me like going, woke him up. And so he rolled, he said, what's the matter? And I'm like, and he was like, oh my God. And he dove out of the bed, tore around to my side. And he was trying to pick me up like a baby sort of. And he had his hand like on the back of my neck, how babies can't hold their head up. And he had that sort of parental hand on the back of my head and the other hand here. And I was trying to communicate to him the fact that I needed to go to the bathroom. So I couldn't really get that across to him. And I'm trying to move, and I'm trying to like nudge my head towards the bathroom. And as I'm trying to like move my head, he's like holding my head, like thinking it's falling, and there was no communication happening there. So finally, he figured out what I was trying to say, and I couldn't get up. So he had to lift me, and he had to bring me into the bathroom, and he had to sit me down on the toilet. And then he had to stand there with his hands on my shoulders and his body up against me and hold me because I couldn't even hold myself up. And I nearly had an accident. I had no control over anything, and I just sat there and cried. And he was like, what's happening? And I said, I don't know. And I just said, call my mother, just call my mother. So he called my mother, and he said, just, can you come? And so my mother came, and that whole morning was just me crying, and just, I didn't know what the heck was going on. I had no ability to do anything. I was, my mother's like, well, let's call your doctor. And I'm like, okay, can you give me my phone? So she gave me my phone, and I had all I could do just to, to get tap out the number. I mean, I had it in my lap, and I was like, I couldn't even tap out the number. And then speaking was difficult. Like I couldn't draw in enough breath to sort of project my voice. So when they answered the phone, I had them on speaker, and I'm trying to talk to them, and they couldn't hear me. So my mom had to take over and take the phone. And so we did end up getting an appointment, and we get in she brings me out, puts me in the car, and we're driving, and it's like a tree-lined street, and the sun is behind the trees. And as you're driving, the sun is coming through the trees, and it's like hitting your eyes, like my husband calls it machine gun style. And I couldn't deal with that. It was like the light was like a strobe light, and I couldn't deal with that. It was freaking me out. It was making my heart palpitate. it was making, I couldn't breathe, and my heart was racing, and everything was just a mess. And so I closed my eyes, and I can still see it through my eyelid. I can still see the light, So I took my mother's coat and I put it over my face, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I can't deal with the light. So we got to the doctor, and we went in, and the doctor ended up ordering for me a 48-hour heart monitor. I complained of, the fact that I didn't have any control over my bowels in the morning. She ordered me an upper GI, lower GI, a colonoscopy. She wanted me to go and see a gastroenterologist. She wanted me to go see a cardiologist. And then she also wanted me to go have an MRI brain scan. And I have to say my PCP was pretty good. She did listen to me. She did sort of, I said, I want this test, and she ordered it, and she did sort of listen, but she didn't have any idea what was happening either. She didn't have any idea what was happening. So from there, now there's about a little 2-week window where this is going on constantly, and I have no idea what's wrong. Weak, dizzy, paranoid, can't bring myself to the bathroom, can't brush my teeth, can't take a shower, can't cook anything, I couldn't do anything for myself. And I have to go to all these appointments. And there were like little signs that I didn't know were signs throughout this time period. Like when I came home from the hospital right after my hysterectomy, the very first night that I was home, and I didn't quite realize this till a year later, on Facebook, they have a memory button, and it'll show you on this day in previous years. And a year after that, on this day, when I came home from the hysterectomy, I had said that I was having nap jerks, which is it's like a funny word, but it's that thing that happens when you're falling asleep and you feel like the bed sort of fell out from under you and you're just about asleep and you kind of, And I remember after I read that I wrote that, I remembered, wow, yeah, I had that like 5, 6, 7 times during the night that night. And at that point, reading it a year later, I realized, that was a sign. And, there were just certain things that had I known what POTS was, or had I known what dysautonomia was, or had I known, what was going on in my brain, that certain things would have, been flags. And one night I had to stay at my mother's house so that I could go to a doctor who was very close to her house the next day. And I slept in the recliner in her living room rather than sleeping on a bed. And when I woke up that morning, after having slept, sort of up, I didn't feel so bad. And I said to my mother, I don't know if it's the recliner or what, but I don't quite feel as bad this morning. And I wish I had realized it, because maybe I would have had some better nights. But I was going to all these appointments. I would have, I went to the gastroenterologist, and I walked in there with a list, and I said, all my life I've had all these things that, nobody seems to want to deal with. Like I had a gallbladder issue at one point, and I had been told that I had IBS, and I had been told that I had lactose intolerance, and just all these different things. And I said, I'm wondering if maybe I have leaky gut syndrome. And the gastroenterologist said, well, we don't treat that. We don't treat leaky gut syndrome. And I'm like, you're a gastroenterologist. You don't treat leaky gut syndrome? And he was like, no, we don't know. You might want to go see a naturopath. Okay. So I just said, you know what, let's just do the upper GI, and I'll take my test results and I'll be on my way. So I didn't feel too good about him. I did go have the upper GI. And the interesting thing is, when I had the upper GI, they had to put me under anesthesia. And he said to me, so we're going to use fentanyl. And it's the same thing I had with my hysterectomy. And I thought to myself, what if that was, what if that is what caused this? And I'm like, I have to have the test done. I have to just have the test done. So they did the test. It was very quick, and I came out of it, and I was so much worse after I came out of that upper GI. I was convinced that it was either the fentanyl or something to do with anesthesia. I was convinced that that's what it was, because it just seemed too odd to me that after the hysterectomy and then after the upper GI, where I had the same sort of drugs put in my body, that this got worse. So I was so convinced of it. So I hadn't had any answers from any of these doctor's appointments yet. And my husband had been home this whole time, not going to work or anything. He was working for himself, so he was just staying with me. And he said to me, I'm going to have to go back to work. And I did not want to be alone. I was terrified. I was afraid I was going to pass out. I was afraid I was going to hit my head on something. I was afraid I was going to have that, paralysis and not be able to dial the phone. I was just terrified. And I was like, well, if you feel you have to go back to work, then I want to go stay with my parents because I can't be alone. So he brought me to my father's house. And I got there and he dropped me off and I was having palpitations, like really, really bad ones. And when you jog or something and your heart rate goes up really high and you stop and then you're like, okay, and you do some deep breaths or whatever, you walk around a little bit and you feel it come back down. My heart felt really high like that. Like I had just done something really strenuous or jogged or run or been scared or something. And so I kept trying to calm it down and it just wouldn't. And after like a half an hour of going through this, I started crying. So we're all in the living room. There's my father, his wife, and my older stepsister and myself. And they were watching TV and I'm on a love seat and they're in the rest of the furniture. And I'm lying there and I'm trying, okay, maybe I'll elevate my feet. Maybe that will help. And I'm doing these deep breathing exercises and nothing's helping. And I just started crying and crying and crying. And they were kind of looking at me what is she doing? Why is she breathing like that? And what's going on? And finally my father said, what's going on with you? And I said, it's my heart. It won't calm down. And he's like, okay. So he got up and he went to the dining room table and he has a blood pressure monitor and it monitors your heart rate and everything. It's something that he had for himself. And he said, come over here. I want to take your blood pressure. And I had to walk maybe 3 feet to get from where I was sitting to the dining room table. And it felt like I walked from New York to Los Angeles. It was so hard to get to that table. And I put my arm on the table and I was like, I just couldn't even hold it up. And my father put the thing on my finger for the pulse. And he looked at my stepmother and he goes, 119. And so my stepsister said to me, you need to calm down. And I said, it's not about that. And I understand why they thought that. I mean, they thought that I was in panic, but I was not in panic. And so then he tried taking my blood pressure and the numbers didn't seem right to him. And the pulse kept, hovering around 120 or so. And finally he just said, you know what, I'm taking you to the hospital. This is ridiculous. And I was like, okay. Now he lives closer to Boston and he's in a much bigger area for, much bigger hospitals. And I thought, okay, maybe this will be the thing. So they called my sister and my sister came and her and my father took me to the hospital, the bigger hospital. And we went in and I'm in the emergency room and they sat me on a gurney, but I was sitting up straight. And as long as I was sitting up straight with my legs out straight, I mean, the palpitations were still there, but I was a little bit calmer. And my father and my sister are over here and the doctors and the nurses and everybody are over here. And I could look this way and I could talk to the doctors and I could talk to the nurses and I'd be all right. If I turned this way to talk to my father and my sister, no, I had to turn back. Every time I would turn my head this way, I would get dizzy. My palpitations would get worse. I was like, what is going on? And I'm like, okay, just stare straight. Find an object on the wall, stare at it and hold your gaze. And it sort of helped a little bit, but it wasn't completely calming down. So this cardiologist came in and he said, we're looking over your EKG and we'll be back and, just try to relax. And they gave me water and everything. And so I said to the nurse, I need to go to the bathroom. She's like, okay. So my father and my sister left the room and she brought in a commode thing. And she said, and I said, please stay. I'm afraid to get up. And she said, okay. So, and I had a heart monitor thing on me and I got up to get onto the commode and, I'm straining just to hold myself up and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to fall over. And the nurse goes, how do you feel right now? And I said, awful. And she goes, okay, because your heart rate's really high. And this tells me that you're straining. When you get up, that you're straining. For your heart rate to come up that much, I can see that this isn't a panic attack or anything. So I finished. She got me back in the bed. And then a few minutes later, the doctor comes in and he says, this is not a panic attack. We don't know what it is, but we're going to admit you because until we know what it is, we can't, in good faith, send you back out there. And I was like, thank God, they're going to actually listen to me. They saw something, thank goodness. So I went in to the hospital and they did, what did they do? They did a brain scan. They did a dye test of the surgical area to make sure that that was all right. They did an ultrasound on my carotid arteries. They did an echocardiogram. They had me on a heart monitor 24/7. They had me listed as a fall risk. I was in the telemetry unit, so I couldn't get up without the nurse, and that was pretty much only just to go to the restroom. And then my surgeon came in to visit me, the one that did my hysterectomy, and he said to me, you certainly have everyone's attention. We're not sure what's happening here. And he said, I really don't think it could have anything to do with your surgery. We've looked everything over. Everything seems to be fine. And I said, I have no pain from the surgery. And, I really can't imagine that, I just can't, I don't have any idea what this is. So I was there for 4 days. And on the fourth day, the cardiologist came in to talk to me and I had my lunch tray. And she said, we're just here to talk. We're not going to do anything to you so you can continue to eat. And so I was eating and I said to her, I noticed every time I eat, this gets worse. And she was like, and just sort of like went over her head and she didn't think anything of it. And a little while later, a neurologist came in and she wanted me to do a balance test. So she had me stand up and close my eyes and hold my arms up and do all these things. And she asked me a bunch of questions. And I said, well, I noticed that after I eat, it seems to get worse. And she was just kind of like, And again, didn't register with her or anything. And then a little later on, the nurse came in and she said, how are you feeling? And I said, I notice every time I eat, it seems to get worse. And the nurse said, okay, I'm going to go tell your doctor that. Okay, so a little while later, another nurse came in and she said, we are going to take your blood pressure and your pulse 3 times. You're going to lie down flat for 2 minutes and we're going to take them. Then you're going to sit up for 2 minutes and we're going to take them. And then you're going to stand up for 2 minutes and we're going to take them. And so they did all this and she left the room. I didn't know what my numbers were or anything. And a little while later, the doctor came in and he said, you have postural tachycardia. Never heard of it before in my life. There was a whiteboard in the room and he started scribbling a whole bunch of stuff on this whiteboard. I couldn't read it. I couldn't read his handwriting. And he had this packet of information in his hand. And he said, so this is something that it's just when you stand up, your heart rate is increasing. It's not dangerous. It's not life-threatening. Nothing bad is going to happen. What you need to do is a lot of exercise. You need to drink a ton of Gatorade and you need to put a lot of salt on your food. And in 3 months, it's going to go away. And no medication is required. And that's all there is to it. And I was like, I was a little bit blindsided, but I was also like, it has a name and now we know what it is. And, my nutritionist doesn't want me to have sugar and artificial colors and artificial flavors. And can I have coconut water instead of Gatorade because it has electrolytes? And he said, well, I don't know what that is. Just drink the Gatorade and you'll be fine. And I was like, oh, okay. So he left the room. He told me, we're going to release you. You can call somebody for a ride. So as soon as he left the room, I had this 5 moments of bliss where I was like, okay, I know what's wrong and it's not life-threatening and it's going to go away. And I was so happy. And I started texting everybody, and have an answer. This is what it is. And they're letting me out of the hospital. And so my father came to get me. And while I was waiting for him, I started reading through this packet that he gave me. And I started to think, and common sense started to come in and say to me, wait a minute. It's just going to go away in 3 months. How? And supposed to eat a lot of salt. Isn't that bad for you? And just all these questions started popping in my head. So then, of course, you start to Google things. And it just, the first 24 hours after I had that diagnosis was kind of a mess. a whole bunch of things happened. I was up, I was down, I was up, I was down, and I just thought, I don't know, it didn't seem solid to me. I Googled it, and I started seeing all these really scary things on the internet. There's no cure. It can be fatal. Most patients cannot work. Most patients cannot drive. A lot of them are in wheelchairs. There's no medication for this. There's really no diet for this. There's, it was all this bad information. And then I was trying to look up what causes it. Was it my hysterectomy? Was it the anesthesia? And I'm finding all these things that said, oh, it's caused by deconditioned legs. And at first I was like, okay, well, I guess I sit in the car for an hour every day, and I sit at a desk all day every day, and maybe I guess I could say I have deconditioned legs. But then somebody said to me, well, if that was the case, wouldn't every single person in a wheelchair have this? And I kind of went, yeah, it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And then my husband, when I let him know what was going on, he started trying to find information as well. And he sent me a video. It was a very young girl. She was probably, 16 or 17 years old, talking about having POTS. And I didn't watch the whole thing. I only watched the first couple of minutes because the first couple of minutes was enough to throw me over the edge. She started talking about how pretty much everybody in her life just walked away from her. And they were all kind of like, doing their own thing and don't really have time for her. And, not that they don't care, but, they're going to move on with your life and you're going to be stuck in your house all by yourself. And I just was like, you got to be kidding me. Is this what my future holds? So my husband came and got me, and I went home, and the next several days, I guess, I think I was released from the hospital, I don't even know what day, the 16th maybe. But anyways, the next few days, I was miserable. I couldn't do anything. I had so much heart palpitation, so much dizziness, shortness of breath. Again, after being in that bed for 4 days and them not letting me up, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get up and walk. They wanted me to get up and walk 60 seconds every hour to try to get used to being upright. And I noticed that I couldn't watch TV. Anything that was on the TV, I know now it was too much stimuli. My brain couldn't handle it, but I didn't know what was going on at that time. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't read because I couldn't make my eyes go from left to right. I couldn't handle if there was more than one thing happening in a room. Like if 2 people are talking over here and the TV's on over there, that was way too much. I couldn't handle that. I was crying constantly. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't do anything for myself. Couldn't brush my teeth. I had to have my husband pretty much holding me up all the time. And it was a pretty bad time. So I contacted my friend Francesca again, and I told her I had this diagnosis. And she called Dr. Symko, which is the doctor that she had told me about before. And she said to me, he says he knows what this is, and he says he can help you. That was like the clouds parting, I'm like, he knows what it is and he can help me, because all these things I'm reading are saying that there's no cure and there's really nothing you can do about it. And I had gone onto all these support pages, like on Facebook and whatever, and all these people were just, oh my God. She said, this is permanent, and I suggest you get used to it. I said, I'm not going to get used to this. No way. I'm going to fight this. There's got to be, this is something my husband and I kept saying in the early days of this was, somebody somewhere has to know something. This is 2015 at this point. Somebody's got to know something, whether it's this country or another country, or, somebody's got to know something about this. This cannot be the end of the line for this. And so when Francesca told me that Dr. Symko could help, I was like, just get me there. I called his office, and the secretary said, well, we have this extensive packet that you need to fill out of, all your medical history and everything. And I said, okay, so they emailed this thing to me. And extensive. That's a pretty good word for it. It was pages and pages and pages. He wanted to know every single thing about your medical history from birth till this morning. He wanted to know anything you had ever taken. He wanted to know about your diet. He wanted to know, mentally how you were. He wanted to know your opinion of what was wrong with you, which I loved. He wanted to know, are there any things that happened in your life that you look back on and you think that was toxic, or that was really bad and I wish I hadn't done that, or whatever. And it took me 3 days to fill this thing out. And part of that is because it was so extensive, but part of it was because of POTS too, because, you can only hold the pen for so long, and, you just can't do it. It's just, it was just so hard to do. And it was, my mission was to get this paperwork done so I could see this doctor. So I finally got it all filled out. And in filling it out, I realized that over the years in my life, I had been told that I had gallbladder issues, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, high cholesterol, anemia, heart murmur, IBS, lactobacillosis, psoriasis or eczema, cystic acne, toenail infections, alopecia, phlebitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, high estrogen, fibroid tumors, restless leg syndrome, phlebitis, overactive acid production in the stomach, Schottky's ring, lactose intolerance, gluten intolerance, varicose veins, and low vitamin D. And I'm looking at this list and I'm like, maybe something's connected. This seems to be, that's an awful lot of stuff. And, for every one of these things, when you go to the doctor, they're like, okay, you have this item, take this pill. You have this item, take this pill. And it was never about diet, and it was never about exercise. It was always just take this pill. And, I had never looked at it as one comprehensive list before. But now that I did, it was like, you got to be kidding me. So I filled out all the paperwork and I went to go see this doctor. My father brought me on the appointment, and that was sort of deliberate on my part, because I felt like my father was trying really hard to help me. I'm not saying that he wasn't, but I felt like he thought also that it was stress, because a couple of times he had said to me in the hospital, like, life is not that tough and you need to, and I'm like, Dad, I swear to God, if this was stress, I would tell you. I remember saying to him in the hospital, I said, Dad, I'm telling you, my life is not that stressful. I have a great husband. I love my house. I love my job. The things I think about are the things everybody thinks about, like bills and what, but not to the point of this. I said, if I was really, honest to God, if I was that bad off, I would tell you, So I really wanted my dad to take me because I wanted him to understand that it was physical. So we went, and Dr. Symko, shameless plug for Dr. Symko, if you want to look him up. Dr. Symko came out and he brought me in the room and he sat me on a low bed thing. And he was so calm, and he had read every last word of that 3-day to fill out medical history, and he knew my medical history. He already had ideas in his head of, what's going on in the brain and what things happened to me when I was little that caused, and what things when I was a teenager, and all these things that had conspired to make this crazy list of things that I had wrong with me. But he sat me down on this bed and he said, I'm going to do a couple of little tests, and I don't want to make you feel worse, but I just want to check a couple of things. I said, okay. So a couple of things that he did, which I can't go into real specifics about, but one thing he did was he used a tuning fork, and he held it next to my ear and he asked me questions, and he did a couple small things like that. And he sort of confirmed all his suspicions in doing these things. And he said, there's a few more tests I could do, but I already know what I need to know, and I don't want to make you feel worse. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to talk about what we can do going forward. And Francesca actually came to my appointment with me too, which is a really big deal. That's not something that most nutritionists would do, is, drop their kid off at school and come to your appointment with you. But she did. She came to the appointment with me. She helped me take notes. She was great. And so he, at one point, he had one of those little finger monitors on me for pulse, and I could see the screen. And he said to me, okay, I want you to do this specific movement with your tongue. So he had me do this movement with my tongue, and I could see the little heart monitor. And as 10 seconds went by, I could see my heart rate coming down. And he's like, yeah. He says, okay, so we're gonna give you an exercise to do. You're very, very fragile. And I think at this point, this is all you can handle. And as time goes on, you'll come in and we'll check and see where you're at, and we'll give you, other exercises to do. But for now, he wanted me to do this specific tongue movement. And he said, I want you to do it 10 times a day. He said, you can do it more, but don't do it less. And I said, okay. And I said, would you please talk to my father and, explain to him what's going on, because it's too much. Your daughter's very fragile and she's not causing this. Her brain is doing this to her and she has no control over it, but she will eventually. We'll get it in line. But for now, there's things she needs to do. The diet is paramount. She's going to need to take some supplements, and we're going to give her some exercises to do. And it's going to be a minimum of 6 months before she starts to feel sort of like her life was. 6 months to a year, hopefully closer to the 6 months. And he, explained to him that I can't have gluten, I can't have dairy, I can't have soy, I can't have sugar. And we're going to take these supplements and we're going to do these exercises, and just she needs support and she needs patience. And my father was like, absolutely. So we went out into the waiting room, and I remember when he did that thing with the heart monitor and had me move my tongue, and I saw the number coming down, and I thought to myself, this guy knows what he's doing. This is the guy. Anything he tells me, if this guy says to me, I want you to go stand on the corner wearing a gorilla suit and hand out free bananas, I would have gone and stood on the corner in a gorilla suit and handed out free bananas. I mean, he knew what he was doing. So we went into the waiting room to pay my bill, and they added up all the supplements and everything. And I looked in my wallet and I didn't have enough money. And I turned around and I said to my dad, I need your credit card. And I would never, but I was like, I gotta get better. This is the guy and I gotta get better. And my father was just like, here you go. And he gave me his credit card. Thank God. So it turned out Dr. Symko felt that I had leaky gut syndrome, celiac disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, and damage to my brain stem. And it all went all the way back to birth. I had been born with congenital hip dysplasia, and they had done surgery on me at 9 months old, and I had gotten staph, and they had to give me these massive doses of antibiotics as a baby. And, obviously that kills the gut bacteria. And then throughout my life, there had been other smaller surgeries, like I had had a hernia when I was in second grade, and, all these different times that, you're constantly being flushed with antibiotics and everything. And there were other things that went on in my life too, smaller things, but it all, built up and contributed. And I can't say for certain what I think caused the POTS. I think it was a combination of things, but I think that the hysterectomy, I think, had something to do with it, but I also think massive doses of sugar in my life had something to do with it. There was a study that I had read from UCLA, and I believe it was 2012. I had it written down somewhere here, that they did this study on sugar's effect on the brain. And what they found was that if the brain was attempting to make connections or repair things, that if there was sugar present, it would actually stop the brain from making these connections or making repairs. And so at that point, this diet that the doctor has put me on, it's been really easy for me because I've started to view the things that he tells me I can't have like they're poisonous. I mean, and that's in a literal sense. I see them as poison now. And so it's been very easy for me. And, earlier times in my life when you would go to the doctor and they'd say, oh, you should probably lose a little bit of weight, or, your cholesterol is too high or whatever. And they'd tell you this is what you should eat. And, if you're a reasonably well-educated person, you know what you're supposed to eat. But, if someone puts birthday cake in front of your face, you're going to eat it, and you're going to say, oh, I'll start Monday. It'll be fine. But when you become this sick, then you really start to look at food, things like meat and vegetables, and, that's food. And you start to look at things like bread and whatever as that's not actually food. It's a food-like substance. And I know there's a lot of talk about that on the internet, and I know that people get fed up with it, and they don't want to hear about, gluten, and they don't want to hear about, it's one day you can eat it and the next day you can't, whatever. But honestly, if you really become sick, all of a sudden the doctor says, only have these things, and you're like, I want to live. So you only have these things, and you feel yourself come up, and you go, oh my God, it works. And so then the things you're not supposed to have, you start to look at as, why would I put that in my system when I know it's going to make me come back down? You don't want to go back down. So it's been very easy for me. This is the diet he has me on, and I know you probably won't be able to see it, but this is the diet he has me on, and I have it online, and I can tell you, where online I have it. But that diet is specific to me. It's specific to the fact that I have celiac, and it's specific to brain, and it's specific to the fact that I had leaky gut initially when he found me. And so, this is not the exact diet that he would give to everybody. It's Tina specific. But, just to get an idea, I think honestly, anybody, if they looked at the column on this side, which is the allowed and or required column, no one's going to get sick on this diet, because basically what it is just all real food that occurs in nature. Basically, it's your meats, it's your vegetables, it's your the fruits that he allows me to have, it's the fluids that he allows me to have, and it's you're not allowed to have soda, you're not allowed to have alcohol, you're not allowed to have things like sugar and processed foods, and you're not going to get sick eating the things on the allowed and required list. But, maybe you would be allowed to have one or two of the things that are on the not allowed list. So it's very strict for me. It might not be as strict for other people. And it had made a huge difference almost immediately. And so when I would go to see Dr. Symko for my appointments, initially I was seeing him every other week. And he would check how I was doing based on things like eye movements, and sort of like when someone has a concussion. I mean, slightly different, but sort of like the way that they check people when they have a concussion, a little bit more detailed than that, and a little bit more specific than that. But he would test to see where I was at, and he would ask me a lot of questions about, what I had been having for symptoms, and, how is the food going, how is sleep going, all these things, and he would adjust my exercise regimen. And the exercises are typically things that you do with hand movements or with eye movements. They're very simple. And it was things that he would say to me, I want you to try to do this 3 times a day, or I want you to try to do this for 10 seconds twice a day, or, whatever. They were all little things, small, easy to do, not time consuming, and they made a difference. And it was tough at first, the first few weeks. We always describe that this syndrome is like this. It's like waves. You'll have a good day and a bad day and a good day and a bad day, and maybe you'll have 2 or 3 good days and then one bad, and then come back up. And we would always, my husband and I, be looking for, well, what caused this? I feel like I'm having a setback. And I'd call the doctor and I'd say, why is this happening? And he'd say, it's your brain. It's your brain. And you're trying to strengthen it, and you're trying to get it back to where it needs to be. And it's a process, and you're going to have dips in the, and you're going to have hills and valleys in this. And there's no cause why things go downhill a little bit here or uphill a little bit there. It's not like anything you did. It's not like, I didn't eat enough broccoli on Tuesday, and it's not, it has nothing to do with that. So, it's frustrating initially. And I remember my husband saying to me after about 2 months, I don't notice your progress day to day, and I don't notice your progress week to week, but I notice your progress month over month. And they had me keeping a journal of everything that I was eating and everything that I was doing and how I was feeling, and I still have the journal. And he said, go back in your journal to a month ago and read and see. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It's not a magic pill, and it's not, I don't know how the medication industry is in other countries, but in the United States, it's awful. I mean, if you watch television here for half an hour, you're going to see 15 medication commercials, and it's basically just a list of the side effects. And when you go to the doctor, all they want to know is, what do you have and what pill can I match you up with? And next, and then you go make your copayment and you're out of there. I don't know if it's like that in other countries, but here it's infinitely frustrating when, I go to Dr. Symko and he looks at your entire person, and he looks at your entire history, and he looks at cause and effect, and he says, we're going to fix this with food. We're going to fix this by eliminating the things that cause it and by adding the things that heal it. And maybe I take supplements here and there. Like I take vitamin D right now, which, we're never in the sun. We're always in buildings. If I was out in the sun more, maybe I wouldn't even need that. But for the most part, it's just do the diet, do the exercises, and take the supplements if you have any. And that's it. It's really not that hard. It's not a magic pill. You're not gonna pop a bottle and swallow a couple of pills and in 24 hours feel better. And it's not gonna go away like the flu, but it will. And the first day that I went to see him, I was unable to walk 10 steps without feeling like I'm gonna drop. From the time I saw Dr. Symko, I first saw him December 8th, and it was either March 20th or 21st, so just about 4 months. I went from being unable to brush my teeth, being unable to hold myself up on the toilet, to get in the car, drive to work, and do my job. And 4 months, it may seem like it's forever when you're sitting in your house sick thinking, I want my life back. 4 months may seem like a really long time. It is really not in the grand scheme of things. And especially the gift of this is that you're doing it naturally. You're not taking all kinds of prescription medications that are going to mess with other systems in your body. And you're not continuing to poison yourself with, all these things that if you start to read about them, I'm telling you, I know people don't want to hear about the nutrition thing. I know they really, truly don't. Pick up this book, Food by Dr. Mark Hyman. If you start to read about these things, you will see that really what you eat can make you or break you. What you drink can make you or break you. And what you do with your time can make you or break you. And I have now, I remember I had this whole setup in my living room when I was at my sickest. It was a big chair, and I had pillows behind my head, and I have this big stuffed dog. And the big stuffed dog has a really big head and a really big butt, and his middle is skinny, so I would lean my head on him, and it would keep me from sort of rolling or falling over, and I could take a little bit of a nap like that. And I had a little side table, and on the little side table was this journal, this water bottle, this little salt bucket, and my cell phone. And I had a extension cord there so that I could plug in a hair dryer, or I could plug in whatever I needed. And that was my world, was a little chair and a little side table. And I remember sitting there thinking, what if I can never go to the beach again? What if I can never see a movie in a theater, or go out to dinner with my husband, or what if I can never do these things again? What if this chair is my life? What if this is my future? I can never drive a car, or, it is the scariest thing in the world. And when you're going through it, it's so easy to just want to just give me a pill that'll make me better. And that's fine with me that there was no such thing. It's fine with me that it took 4 months, and I will probably have to continue to do a little bit of neurological exercises the rest of my life. That's fine, because I went to the beach last Saturday And I went out to dinner with my husband when we were done at the beach, and I can drive a car, and I'm back at my job. And, you know, little tiny things like that are so priceless. And not that I ever took them for granted, because I really didn't, but I was 45 when this hit, and I thought, God, I'm not done. Like, you know, I haven't been to Europe. Like, there's just so many things that you want to do, and it doesn't even have to be as big as going to Europe. I mean, maybe all you really wanted to do was like plant some flowers in the yard this spring, but you want to be able to do that. And just the diet and the exercises and the supplements, that's all it is. It's not that hard, and it works. And I'm here. I had my first episode of this nasty syndrome November 1st of 2015. And here I am. What's today's date? It's July 26th, 2018. And my life is almost 100% normal. I'm only working 30 hours a week instead of 40 to 45, but that's all right with me because I can do it. And I, you know, still have to go and see the doctor like once a month maybe, and check in with him and see how things are going. And things are great. I just recently hired a personal trainer, and I'm going to the gym twice a week now with this guy, and he's kicking my butt. Hopefully I'm going to drop 35 or 40 pounds. And life is good. And it can be this way for everybody that has POTS, I truly believe. It is a brain disorder. This is not your heart. This is not, you know, you don't have anxiety. Maybe it causes you to feel anxious, because it certainly caused me to feel anxious. But anxious is not causing POTS. POTS is causing anxiety. And it doesn't have to be this way for you. You can get better. I got better. You can get better. And that's what I wanted to say in this video. You can get better.
Well, thank you so much, Tina, for sharing your story. It's really very inspiring to hear. You know, as you said, you went from being in a living hell, you know, and sitting in that chair and wondering, is this going to be your life forever? And you know, I remember that experience, and many people who had POTS or recovered or who may have it now will know that experience. And yet, you know, there you are now, not just being able to do the small things, which of course we think are small, but when we have POTS, my God, do they seem so big, you know, just to be able to do those small things again, and they are such huge achievements. But now to be, you know, getting kind of put through your paces with your personal trainer, which would have seemed totally impossible. You know, beyond impossible back then. And it's just such a testimony to you, and also the work of Dr. Symko. And there are some things that, you know, your story kind of sparked in me, which I thought I might just ask you about. We have a little bit of discussion about further a few other things. So one is, if you were to pinpoint it, I mean, there's this whole constellation of things that have happened to you throughout your life that, you know, I think contributed to the pattern, and I totally agree with you with that. But often with POTS, there's a kind of final straw that tips things over into a perfect storm situation. And, And often, you know, when you read about people who get it, it is a surgery that can trigger, that can be the final straw. And what's interesting about that, from my perspective, you know, I argue that POTS is a kind of hardwired state of trauma in the brain, whether it's caused by physical or mental trauma. But often you have cases like you, where you didn't have an anxiety disorder before this or anything like that, and yet you have this physical invasion, which is the surgery, and then that can cause the traumatized state, which is, you know, I think important to mention. When you talk about brain retraining or anything like that, people think, oh, you're saying this is anxiety. But actually, these kind of traumas can have powerful impacts on our brain that we haven't really thought about before, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think it was?
I think, you know, this is my personal opinion. This is not from my doctor. This is my personal opinion. Yeah. I feel that prior to the surgery, I definitely had leaky gut syndrome, and I think I had it for a very long time. And I think that I was a severe sugar addict. But I think that what happened was I had the surgery, And if you read about now, they are finding such a strong connection between the gut and the brain, and that there is a neurological highway between the two. And I feel like you go and you have this surgery, you already have leaky gut syndrome, so you're not 100% to begin with that neurological highway. Then they cut your entire abdomen open, and they move things around, and they cut a piece out, and they sew you back together, and then and then you go home. And I had that 48-hour period the day before Halloween and Halloween Day where I consumed so much sugar. I can't believe it. I think if the leaky gut hadn't done it and the surgery hadn't done it, I think my body trying to repair itself after surgery and then just being bombarded with sugar was the final straw. That's my personal feeling. I feel like after I ingested all that sugar and I got up the next day and that jolt that happened, it was like my brain finally said, that's enough. You've screwed up for the last time. That's enough. We keep you healthy. We do our best for you. We try to keep you upright, but no, you just keep eating little candy bars. Yes. And, that's my personal feeling. I really feel that it was those three items that conspired. It was having that trauma, having that whole area of the body where that system exists, where that neurological highway is trying to get to your brain, cut into, moved around, messed with, and then it's trying to heal, and it's doing its best to okay, let's put everything back together. And I sit there and eat donuts and candy like an idiot. I think that's what caused it personally. Yeah. I have no scientific proof of that, but that's my opinion.
I mean, for me, listening to your story, I would agree that seems to be the kind of perfect storm situation. Right. And obviously, a hysterectomy is very, very invasive. And then the interesting thing about the sugar, people might listen to this and think, oh, well, it's just sugar, and this is the kind of stuff that we think about. But actually, sugar is bad for all of us, but it's particularly bad when you're in a POTS situation, you're in a traumatized situation, because sugar actually forces your body to release stress hormones. It forces your body to release adrenaline. So if you're in the situation where you're already doing that because of the trauma of the surgery, and then you add in this huge amount of sugar and nothing else, essentially, I think that would indeed have been a big trigger at that point. I don't think that was insignificant at all. I think it could have been the final straw. Yeah. Right.
And that's what I think too. And, now it's funny, like at work, I'll come in the morning and there'll be a box of donuts on the counter, and they laugh at me because I go over and I lift the lid and I go and I smell them, and then I put the lid back down and I walk away and they laugh at me, and I'm like, I just want to smell them. I just want to say hi, because I won't touch it. I just won't touch it. And, and I know what it's doing to me. I know, that if I give in to the fact that there's a blueberry-filled sugar frosted donut sitting there. No, absolutely not, So, yeah, it's poison. It really is poison. And it's funny to me that people are willing to accept that sugar will rot your teeth, and they're willing to accept that sugar will cause diabetes, and they're willing to accept that sugar will make them fat, but they are not willing to accept all the other things that sugar will do to your body. And they're like, well, it's okay once in a while. It's not. It's horrible. It's horrible. And people will say, well, you really can't avoid it. I've been avoiding it since November 1st of 2015. I have not had sugar since November 1st of 2015. You can avoid it. Just eat actual food. And, yes, there's some in things like fruit, and yes, there's some in carrots or sweet potatoes, but it's a naturally occurring. We're not talking about a Snickers bar. We're not talking about, the birthday cake that you buy at the grocery store. And you can find, great recipes and things for some of this stuff that, you won't feel deprived at all. And especially my friend Francesca, the nutritionist, who I'm shamelessly plugging here today because I believe in her so deeply. Yes. Francesca. Her website has unbelievable recipes on it. I mean, there's nothing you can't have. She even has a recipe for marshmallows. I mean, there's nothing you can't have. It's just that it will be healthy for you, and it will not destroy you. You know, I don't understand, and I was one of these people that willfully poison themselves every day. And you know, like I said, you know it's bad for you, but you're always like, yeah, I'll start Monday, or you know, one little piece won't kill me, or whatever. But you know, if you really cut it out, you really feel a difference.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that from my own experience and also the experience of other people with POTS, even those who have recovered, sugar actually often remains no-go even after recovery.
Right.
You know, I just think, I mean, my own experience when I have a terrible sweet tooth as well. So, you know, so actually you're inspiring for me that you've managed to do this from the 1st of November 2015. But I notice if I go and have a lot of sweet things, even if it's something like a smoothie bowl or a smoothie, that will really affect me still today. So
yeah, yep.
It's something we have to be so careful about. And the other thing I wanted to pick up on was, you know, you talked about how it's, you know, quite rightly, it's not cardiac. There's the cardiac symptom, but it's not a cardiac problem. And we have this kind of way of thinking about POTS, which leaves this massive organ between our ears out of the picture. And yet all of these symptoms you talk about, you know, which many people have, and they're so upsetting, they're so obviously neurological, like getting the electrical jolt, like losing your balance, like being sensitive to light, like getting those, you know, you call them the nap jerks, and they're also called hypnagogic jerks, which I remember from my own time. You know, they're very scary. You know, all of these things are clearly brain-related, and yet people, you know, the brain is not being researched in POTS, even though they're having these kind of symptoms, and even though people know it's dysautonomia, which of course must be autonomic nervous system related.
Of course. Yeah. It's so logical.
Yes, it's so logical. And yet you get these situations, and I'm really, you know, angry on your behalf when you described the situation when you were given your diagnosis, because for someone to come in and say, you know, this is the name of the condition, it's not dangerous, you know, there's no kind of real issue here, it goes away in 3 months. I've never heard, I mean, where is that coming from, you know? And part of that, you know, people aren't studying it, but the name POTS makes it sound like it's just a problem with your heart when you stand up, which really minimizes this whole really complex, vast, all these different things that are actually happening, because when your brain goes out of whack, everything goes out of whack.
Right. It's frustrating to me when I think back, and I was very tempted to call those doctors at both hospitals and just get on the phone with them and just read them the riot act, and I didn't do it. I was tempted to write them letters in a very rational fashion and explain to them that, you know, I don't have an anxiety disorder and that this is not what POTS is all about, and it doesn't go away in 3 months. And in particular, I was a little bit fried by the fact that to be in the hospital for 4 days in telemetry because they consider you a fall risk and they don't want you to get a head injury. And then this doctor comes in the room and says to me, I want you to go home and I want you to exercise vigorously and don't worry about it if you feel like you're going to drop, because you won't. Yes, I will. Are you crazy? And you have me in here as a fall risk and you're sending me home to like hit my head. I just, like I said, I had like a little 5-minute window after he gave me my diagnosis where I was like, yay, I have a diagnosis. This is great. I'm going to be all right. And then I kind of went, wait a minute, and started researching, and I just sank from there until I got to meet with Dr. Symko.
Yes, well, you put it so well, you know, when you said that one of your friends said, well, like, everyone in a wheelchair would have POTS if it was caused by deconditioning. Right.
And when you're told something like that and you start to put it into your own life, and I'm like, okay, well, I do have an hour commute, and and you try to fit yourself in that box, but you don't really fit in that box, and you know it somewhere, but you're asking the experts, you're going to doctors and asking them for help, and this is what they're telling you, and so you're conditioned to believe them. Yes. But you know, honestly, if it hadn't been for my husband, and this is another thing I want to say is that not so much for POTS patients, but for their families and their spouses and everything, you got to be supportive. We need support more than anything ever. I mean, my poor husband, I don't know how he did it for those months. I really don't know how he did it. He got up every morning and got me out of the bed and got me, situated in my chair, helped me brush my teeth, helped me get my hair in a ponytail, and cooked my breakfast and cooked my lunch and put it in the fridge for me. And then he went off to work. He would check on me 500 times a day, and then come home and he would, help me with anything that I needed. He would do all the laundry. He would do all the cooking. He would clean the entire house, take care of the cars. I mean, he was doing absolutely everything. And to boot, we had decided to sell the house because we felt that the commute was it was going to be too much. Even if I could find a way to recover, there was no way I was going to have an hour commute after that. And I needed to be closer to the doctor. And we talked to the real estate agent and she was like, you need to replace the roof on the garage before you can sell this place. And my husband's up on the roof on the, re-shingling the garage during all of it. Like, I just don't even know how he did it. And he never missed a beat. He never let me down. He never, I never had a dizzy spell and lost my balance where he wasn't there to catch me. He was right there. And that's what, your loved one needs if they have this. They need physical support, they need mental support, and they need emotional support. I can't tell you how much of this I went through. I cried 500 times a day. I mean, it was horrible. And he would just, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I don't know how he did it. And, hopefully I'll never have to repay him for something that big because I don't want him to go through anything that big. But I will, whatever I have to do, because he was right there for me. And that's, that is equally as priceless as my doctor and equally as priceless as Francesca. Just the support. I can't say how important it is. I just really can't.
You're absolutely right. It's so critically important, and it's wonderful you have such a supportive husband who was able to help you through that. There are many people in these situations who, because those in the medical profession, some of them sadly may turn out these patients, the family then believes the medical opinion, and then you become much more isolated. I would suspect that the suicide rate, for example, amongst those with POTS in certain situations and these kinds of illnesses is very high because you start to doubt yourself then also.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I am just making it up. I had a family member who told me that he thought I'd made it up and decided to contract the condition having read about it on the internet. So that was,
that's nice.
Yeah, a real vote of confidence.
Thank you.
So you have all of these things, and so yes, the love and support, and the more also one can educate. From well, there are great researchers who are pioneering in this area, but that needs to get out there. And the other thing, it needs to get out there. We are lucky that POTS has a kind of heart rate criterion. So people, you can point to that and say, well, hang on, this is something.
I'm not faking that.
Yeah, you're not faking that. Why would you? So, Tina, what would be for you now? Just if I was to ask you to speak to someone now who still has POTS and they're in this current situation, what would be the pieces of advice that you would give to them as your final word on this?
No sugar. Get sugar out of your life. Get anything that your body transforms into sugar out of your life. No bread, no pasta, no white potatoes. Anything that your body takes and converts into sugar, get it out of your life. And that's, no Splenda, no sugar substitutes, no honey, no maple syrup, nothing, at least for a while until you get to a point where, you're if you can find a naturopathic doctor, if they feel that you can handle it at that point. I personally have been given maple syrup and honey back into my life, and that's the only two sweeteners I'm allowed to use. Oh, and coconut sugar, which is pretty good. No sugar is absolutely paramount. That's absolutely paramount. Try to find yourself a chiropractic neurologist. Dr. Symko does do Skype sessions. If you're interested in contacting him, he is drgregsymko.com. This is what his website looks like. I'm sorry, it's not in color. He is fantastic. He listens, and it's really it's up to you how well you're going to do by following the diet, by doing the exercises, by taking the supplements. And it takes tenacity. It takes, when you're having the worst day, to be like, I'm still going to improve. I'm still going to improve. I'm still going to get better. I'm going to fight this. The best and worst advice that I got, the best advice that I got was two things. One was push yourself, but don't push yourself. And that's really hard to navigate, but you will come to a place where you start to understand what that means for you, where like, push yourself. I don't feel like doing my exercises. Do them. Don't push yourself. I need to move that sofa. You can't move that sofa. Like you push yourself, but don't push yourself. Know what your limits are. Know how far you can go. And the second really great piece of advice I got was, don't spend time lying down. If you need to take a nap, try to take it sitting up. When you go to bed at night, make sure that you have your pillows angled up so that you're not sleeping flat. It really does help in the morning. You do need to get your body used to being upright again. Those are the two best pieces of advice that I got. And the worst one that I got was that woman that said, this is permanent. I suggest you get used to it. And no. If people say things like that to you, let it make you angry. And the other thing I would say to people, and it may sound like negativity, but it really isn't. Anybody in your life who's not going to support you, or who's not going to be there for you, or who doesn't believe you, or who tells you that you're not trying hard enough, or that you're imagining things, or that you're looking for attention, or whatever kind of garbage people will say to you, cut them out of your life. And it doesn't even have to be permanent. There were people that I cut out of my life for like 6 months, and I let them back in later when I was better, because I kind of get it. Because they're, if you don't understand something, you're going to say ignorant things. And it's not just illness, that's any part of life or society or whatever. If you don't understand something, you're going to say ignorant things. So I try to give people a little leeway with that. But while you're healing, while you're getting better, you are your first priority. And self-care is not selfishness. I had to twice a day soak my feet in Epsom salts for 20 minutes a day. I had to, stick to this diet to where I couldn't go to anybody's house. I couldn't go to any, social events or whatever. If people wanted to bring me something or send me something, I had to refuse it. There's going to be things that you're going to feel like you're being rude, but you're not. You're taking care of yourself. And if people don't understand that, you got to walk away from them for now. Even if it's only just for now, you've got to be like, I come first, because your health is the only thing that matters in your life. It's literally the only thing that matters in your life. Your job doesn't matter. Your car doesn't matter. Your house doesn't matter. Your pets don't matter. Relationships with friends don't matter. Nothing matters, because if you don't have your health, you don't have any of that anyway. So get your health, and anything that you've had to get rid of, either get back or you can replace. Everything can be rebuilt, but without a foundation, you can't build anything, and your health is your foundation. So that, to me, I think is something that we struggle with, is trying to put ourselves first. And with this particular disorder, and with what it takes to get better, you have no choice. And the people in your life have no choice but to accept it. You have to concentrate on you. So do the self-care, because once you do have your health back, everyone will see that you weren't faking, and you weren't attention seeking, and you weren't exaggerating, and you weren't, flat out lying. When they see that you've gotten better, they'll see that it took a lot of strength for you to do that. It really did. And you may even have people come to you afterwards and say, wow, I don't know how you got through that. Especially, certain people in my life, they said some rude things to me. They said some pretty rude things, and some people said it directly to me, and some people I heard it through the grapevine. And some people I forgave, and some people I did not. But this is I guess it's sort of a good aspect of POTS, is that you sort of figure out some of this stuff. You sort of see like who's worthy of your friendship and who's not, who's worthy of your time and who's not, who's really there for you and who's not. And when you're sick, it's very isolating to begin with. And when you think that, these particular people are my support system, and you watch that one walk away and you watch that one walk away and whatever, and it's very painful. But then, you go through like okay, which people do I feel like they really were cruel and mean and cold and awful, and which people just didn't understand? Because the ones that just don't understand, you're going to let them back in your life and it's going to be okay. And it takes a little soul searching to do that, but it'll be okay. But the self-care, I think, wrapping your mind around the fact that you have to put yourself first, and then actually doing it and not caring how it affects other people, it's the most difficult thing, but it is the most important thing.
No, that's very powerful advice, Tina. And you are living proof that the opposite is true of what that person said to you, that this is a permanent condition. You've got through this. It's a very inspiring story, which I think is going to bring a lot of hope to people, and I think a lot of people will resonate with it, especially those for whom POTS may have been triggered by surgery. And I also think you've spoken very well to the whole diet component, which is so important. And I'm just so delighted for you that you have recovered your health, that you're living a full life again. It's
and I for you.
Thank you very much. And I just really want to thank you for your time and sharing your story today. I really appreciate it.
I'm really glad that I got to do this. It's something that I kept saying to my husband the whole time that I was sick, and after I got better, and I write a little bit, and I have a blog that I haven't really launched yet that I try to get in there and write a little bit every once in a while. And it's just so slow going. And I'm like, when Julie said that you were looking for people, I was like, that's such a great opportunity to be able to reach people and say, you can get better. And that's, to just have, I remember when I was really sick thinking I would like to just find one person that got past this and be like, what did you do? How did you do it? And I think it's a really big deal for people to see, those of us that have gotten better, to know that it's possible, because when you don't think it's possible, like you were talking about the suicide rate, I remember saying to my husband over and over again when I was sick, and like I said, I would cry 500 times a day. I remember saying to him, I can't be like this. I can't be like this. And he'd be like, you're going to get better. And I'd say, but we don't know. And then in the next breath, I'd be like, I can't be like this. I was so angry about it. And I just felt like, there's so much life out there, and I cannot be like this. I cannot be stuck in this chair, and I cannot be, this one extension cord and this journal is my whole life. No, I can't be like this. And it gives you that fight, and I wish that I could box that fight and give it to people who feel like giving up, like as gifts, like, here's some fight,
Well, you have today, in some sense, by sharing your story, you've given people ideas and tools and ways, to think about how they can approach their own recovery. So you are passing on that fight. And I think
hope so.
You've spoken that very well. And this is a fight for all of us to engage in, to get the message out there that there are ways to get better. So again, just thank you very much for sharing your time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.